that strikes me about your work is that there seems to be some um, necessity for you to find the authentic moment, to go against the expectation,
Yeah.
to make the shot look different than you might otherwise see it in another movie, and that it's hard to do that and pull that off.
Yeah, sometimes I'm more successful than others in sort of asserting my independence and
What
you
would
know,
be the example of a movie where you were not able to really do that?
I mean, Jumper is my least successful movie, and because I again was also going against the grain. I mean, that is my MO in my movies, is always go against the grain. I mean, it's just sort of, I have a belligerent sort of personality. I mean, I've heard how uncontrollable I was as an infant, and because I was always challenging my parents, saying, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was never just enough for my parents to say, well, because we said so.
Right.
I needed a better reason than we said so. And I would come up against that in the moment I started making films, in the, commercial movies, because, Universal would say, well, you're shooting Born Identity in Canada. I'd be like, no, I want to shoot it in Paris. And they'd say, well, because we said so, you're shooting in Canada. I'm like, well, that's not a good enough reason. And, there was a lot of friction on Born Identity because the studio just wanted it to be like a dumb commercial movie. They wanted Jason Bourne to battle 50 people in the finale, and they said, just because we said so.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, because other people have done it, I want to do it differently. It scares the hell out of studio executives, until you prove yourself. Once you've done a film like Born Identity and you've done it different and it works, then suddenly you're in this really enviable place where people actually want you to do things differently. And I've never been pressured to conform since Born Identity. In fact, I've had the opposite experience where I'm going to do something and somebody says to me, maybe you're not pushing yourself enough.
Well, I guess the question I have, is that there's this constant struggle for a lot of filmmakers between, getting the money they want or the freedom that they want. The studios give you less freedom, the indies give you more. And it just struck me that given the opportunity to raise the money independently, do this in a different way, you came out with a much more organically intelligent movie than any studio would have let you make. Would you
On
agree
Fair
with
Game
that?
or Board?
I'm talking about Fair Game now.
Yeah. No, no studio would have made Fair Game. We
No.
made the film independently. I mean, the studios don't make dramas anymore.
No.
I mean, it's not like my opinion. They've come out and said, we don't do this anymore. We do pure escapist fare. And specifically, I mean, I'm making a film at Warner Brothers right now, and they're very clear that they're not in the business of making dramas anymore.
What are you shooting there now?
Something with aliens, more escapist fare. And again, even in my most escapist movies, because I do come from sort of a literate background in New York, I find some way to sort of justify. I can talk about any one of my movies with in the same preachy, lofty tones that I might discuss Fair Game. You could just pick any one, and I'd be like, I could discuss it at a cocktail party, and it would, you wouldn't actually be able to tell which is the commercial movie and which is the more serious movie, because even in the most commercial movie, I have some concept, some intellectual idea that I'm exploring. And so my least sort of successful movie is a film called Jumper,
Which
where
saw.
I was exploring, and actually Jumper has more connection to Fair Game than you would think, because in Jumper I was exploring this concept that in all other superhero films, when somebody gets a superpower, they also get a moral code with it.
Mm-hmm.
That basically every superhero film, the superhero ends up saving people at the end. And I thought, well, why? Who said that when you get a superpower, you also become a hero? Right? Because there's actually separate things. We call them superhero films. And I was like, there's never been a superpower film where somebody just gets the power but doesn't become a hero. I thought, wouldn't it be more interesting and more honest for somebody to get a superpower and actually do something very unheroic in the finale?
How would you explain how that film turned out?
Well, because in the end, that's what I did, and I showed the film to the studio, and they said, Hayden Christensen actually abandons the girl in the third act in my original version. Uses his superpower to save himself and abandon her. And they said, the audience will literally kill you. They will throw their popcorn at the screen. Like, he has to redeem himself in the finale.
But wouldn't they have approved that in the script version of it?
The thing is, they were nervous about it, but they said, well, he's broken so many other molds with his other movies, maybe he can break the mold on this one.
Then when they saw it,
they said, you know what, like, you went too far.
So you had to change.
Right, because sometimes cliches are cliches for a reason. In fact, they're almost always a cliche for a reason. It's because they work. I've put myself in both what I consider an enviable position of always going against the cliche, which makes life more interesting, but it's definitely more difficult, because if you actually embrace cliches, it's easier to have a film that works, because cliches are sort of like proven. They're like, things that they're laboratory proven to work. And the moment you go into movies, the way I went into Born Identity, it said, we're not going to grab the woman hostage. It was a cliche that every action movie had. And it was so tempting, even as we were having trouble figuring out how to come up with a satisfying end to Born Identity. And I was like, we're not grabbing the girl hostage. And it was like, the studio's like, well, it'd be so easy. It would solve all your problems. Just grab the girl. They grab the girl. All of Jason Bourne's problems are rolled into one. Just grab the girl. And I'm like, no, it's the cliche that every action movie does. We need to find an answer that does it differently. And in the case of Born Identity, I managed to come up with an ending where we didn't grab the girl hostage, and it still satisfied the audience. And so people trust me to try that, and I'm actually encouraged to try it.